20 years ago, a father and his 9-year-old daughter left Boise for a summer road trip and vanished without a trace. Only a silver Ford Explorer that never came back, and a mother whose faith never faded. 2 decades later, that same vehicle resurfaces in a Montana junkyard. As one mother follows the trail into back doors, hidden shelters, and the cracked psyche of a stolen child, she uncovers a truth more brutal than any she ever imagined. Every year on June 12th, Karen Rayner would begin her day with a routine as familiar as her own reflection in the mirror. For 2 decades, it hadn't wavered. She'd turn on her small, trusty radio perched on the windowsill. It was always tuned to KBOI, our local station, bless its heart, even if the signal was a bit crackly these days. Karen knew every pause of the announcer's voice, could almost recite the words before they were even spoken. This missing persons announcement is brought to you by the Rayner Family Foundation. Missing since June 12, 2004, Thomas Rayner, male, 6 feet tall, brown hair, driving a silver Ford Explorer, license plate ISH049, left Boise with his daughter, Emily Rayner, age 9. If you have any information, please contact the Boise Police Department. The announcer's voice might have changed a few times over the years, but the information never did. Karen would sit quietly, her gaze fixed on the framed photograph on the windowsill. It was an old photo, faded around the edges. 3 of them, bathed in sunshine. Thomas, standing tall in the middle, his arm around Emily's shoulders. Emily, her little face split in a huge grin, clutching a pink purse featuring that beloved Snoopy dog. Bless her heart. That very same purse now rested in a sealed, airtight plastic box, wrapped in soft fabric, tucked carefully under her bed. Karen had washed it, air-dried it, smoothed every wrinkle, as if her little girl was simply away on a trip and might come home any day to reclaim it. Karen lived alone now in the small, cozy cabin on the outskirts of Boise. It used to feel warm and welcoming, but now it just felt quiet. Thomas was gone, along with their daughter. Emily's room remained untouched, the lavender sheets on her bed, the cartoon character pillows, and a crayon drawing Emily had gifted to Karen for her birthday. 20 years. Not a single word. No bodies found, no witnesses, no official conclusion. Every theory had fallen silent. It's enough to break a person. Karen's mother, Nora, nearly 80 herself, had lived with her daughter ever since the disappearance. Even with her failing memory and aging body, she was Karen's rock, the only true comfort left. Nora was often found sitting in her armchair by the kitchen, fingers moving along a well-worn rosary, whispering prayers so softly, Karen sometimes couldn't tell if it was speech or just the sound of her breathing. "Do you still believe she's alive?" Nora asked that June 12th morning, as Karen stood at the calendar, circling the day with a red pen. "It's not about believing, it's about knowing," Karen replied simply, her voice steady, devoid of emotion. The tears had long run dry after all those years. All that remained was a mother's intuition, burning like embers under the ashes. Later that morning, Karen sat in her small home office where she kept the files on the case. Dozens of copies of police reports, maps, satellite photos, call logs, and Thomas's bank statements were all organized into color-coded folders. Each year had its own color, and every page was turned with the utmost care, as if Karen was brushing the hair of a child fast asleep. When the landline rang, Karen didn't rush to answer it. Unexpected calls rarely brought good news, but this time the ringing persisted, and there was something different in the tone. Not a telemarketer, not a wrong number. She picked up the receiver. "Is this Karen Rayner?" "Yes, it is." "This is Sergeant Peter Wells from the Missoula Police Department in Montana. We're contacting you regarding a silver Ford Explorer, license plate ISH049. It was recently found in a salvage yard on the outskirts of Missoula. The car had been crushed, but the license plate was intact. We suspect it may be connected to the 2004 missing persons case in Idaho. We need you to come and identify it." Karen stood silent for a moment. The car make, the license plate. They echoed like familiar numbers in a silent prayer. The line on the other end waited patiently. Karen said softly, "I'll come." That evening, Karen sat before the plastic box holding Emily's purse, opening it once again. She touched the zipper, the faded image of Snoopy. Closing her eyes, Karen remembered that last morning. Emily in a pink dress, pigtails bouncing, begging for more chocolate for the trip. Thomas, already waiting by the car, leaning against the door, bathed in sunlight. Emily running out, turning back to wave one last time. "I'll tell you everything when I get back, I promise," she'd said, her voice full of promise. But that afternoon, the car vanished from every traffic camera, no stops, no phone signals, the two of them, swallowed up by thin air. Karen closed the box, latching it shut. She knew this trip to Montana would be unlike the others. This was the first time in 20 years there'd been a tangible clue, a piece of evidence, a car, the only thing that could connect Karen with the place her daughter had sat for the last time. She walked into the hallway, where Nora sat slowly folding laundry. "Can I come with you?" Nora asked without looking up. Karen nodded. "We'll leave in the morning." Nora laid the shirt aside, saying softly, "This trip might not bring her home, but if we don't go, we'll never know." Karen squeezed her mother's hand. She didn't say anything, but in her heart, a tiny door had cracked open after 2 decades of darkness. The car left Boise just as the sky began to lighten with the faintest hint of dawn. Karen was behind the wheel. She hadn't driven long distances in years, but she didn't want anyone else touching it today. The feeling of control was the only thing keeping her steady. In the passenger seat, Nora leaned her head against the window, holding a small thermos of coffee and a bag of sandwiches she'd prepared earlier that morning. Highway I-90 took them through mountain ranges, sparse forests, and small towns with just a few roadside stores. The scenery flashed by, nameless, silent, as if guiding them to a place where time had turned back on itself 2 decades ago. "Do you remember the last time we drove through Montana?" Nora asked, eyes fixed out the window. Karen nodded slightly. Emily got carsick but tried to sing the whole way. She said if she sang, she wouldn't throw up. They were silent for a while, not because they had nothing to say, but because they feared any words would break what little hope they had left. Late in the afternoon, Karen's old SUV turned onto a dirt road outside Missoula. The GPS signaled they were near the salvage yard, a wide expanse of land surrounded by a rusty wire fence. A wooden sign hanging crookedly read, "Turner's Salvage Yard, since 1982. Karen cut the engine. The surrounding space was cold, even in mid-June. The air was thick with the scent of metal, old oil, and sun-baked plastic. The salvage yard stretched out like a graveyard for machinery, where vehicles lay stacked on top of each other, waiting to be turned into nameless scrap metal. A man emerged from the small corrugated office next to the fence, Eli Turner, the salvage technician. He was in his mid-30s, with dark hair, greasy overalls, and safety glasses perched on his forehead. His voice was polite but maintained a clear distance. "Mrs. Rayner, the police let me know you were coming. The car's around back. I'll show you the way." The silver Ford Explorer appeared behind 3 rows of stripped vehicles. It lay silently, as if it had been sleeping for years. Dusty, tires flat, a side mirror long gone. But Karen recognized it instantly. She walked closer, gently touching the edge of the car door where there was a small, crescent-shaped scratch. Thomas used to call it the garage bite. "This is my husband's car," she said, her eyes fixed on the frame. "There's no doubt about it." Eli nodded, unsurprised. "We thought so too, based on the plates and VIN number. But the car was dropped off here 2 weeks ago, not through the police or an auction. A middle-aged man delivered it with a rental trailer. Paid cash. Didn't give a name." "Do you remember what he looked like?" Karen asked. Eli shrugged. "Just a quick look. Graying hair, old jacket. Looked tired. Nothing special, except for the plates. Nora, who had been standing behind, not far from the small office, carefully observing everything, happened to glance at a pink purse hanging from a wooden hook in the corner of the room. "That looks just like Emily's purse," Nora called out. Karen walked quickly over, stopping as if frozen. She stared at the purse, a Snoopy smiling innocently, the fabric straps worn, and in particular a crooked, hand-stitched repair on the lower right corner. Karen herself had sewn it after Emily tore the bag dragging it down the steps. She reached out, trembling, touching the surface of the purse, very gently. As if just a little more pressure, the image would disappear. A faint purple stain on the edge of the purse, a scrawled letter E, was still faintly visible. "This is hers," Karen whispered. Eli came in, glanced at the purse, and said matter-of-factly, "It was left inside the car. I brought it in here to keep it out of the way. Didn't think it was important." "Did you open it?" Nora asked. "Number." "We're not allowed to. We just set it aside before the car gets crushed." Karen clenched her hand. Her eyes didn't leave the purse. In her mind, images flooded back. Emily carrying it to school, taking it to playdates, even keeping it at the head of her bed when she slept. If this purse really was brought here 2 weeks ago, someone had been keeping it for 20 years. And with that, Emily might still be alive. Karen thanked Eli, took the purse and hugged it as if it were a living thing. As they left the salvage yard, the sky grew overcast. Clouds gathered, threatening rain, but the air in the car was heavier than any storm. "Aren't you going to give the purse to the police?" Nora asked, seeing Karen carefully wrap it in her jacket and place it on her lap. "Not right now," Karen replied. "We need to know more. Something's not right here. And if my daughter really is alive..." She stopped, not finishing the sentence, but her eyes said it all. Karen Rayner wouldn't let the truth slip through her fingers again. Back at the small roadside hotel, Karen placed Emily's pink purse on the wooden table by the window. She didn't turn on the light. The remaining daylight was enough to see the thread, the faded ink, like a small map leading to the place her daughter had once lived, once existed. Nora was making tea in the corner of the room, her hands trembling with age, but her eyes as sharp as ever. "Are you going to open it up and see what's inside?" she asked softly. Karen didn't answer. Her hand had already begun to pull the zipper. The sound of the zipper sliding open was like a long, quiet breath, released after years of being held in. Inside the purse, there wasn't much. A faded blue hair tie, a small pebble, Emily must have picked it up on a hike, a broken pencil stub. Karen placed each item on a tissue, carefully, gently, as if afraid of hurting old memories. When she slipped her hand inside the lining, her fingers brushed against a corner that was folded more tightly than usual. Karen pulled it out gently, a small, old piece of paper, folded squarely. She opened it under the desk lamp. The handwriting was crooked, written in purple ink in a childish hand. "Daddy not coming back. Me locked up." Karen was silent. A breath caught in her throat. She handed the paper to Nora. The old woman read it, then put her hand on her heart. "That's Emily's handwriting," Karen said softly. "No doubt about it. She wrote me instead of I, because she practiced writing letters like that when she was little." Nora nodded, eyes shining. "A little girl wouldn't just make something like that up. She left this for a reason." The next morning, Karen took the purse to the local police station, requesting to speak with the officer in charge of the case, Sergeant Peter Wells. He was the one who had called her the day before. Sergeant Wells was calm, seasoned, gray-haired, and polite. Karen presented the note and expressed her wish to have DNA or trace evidence examined from the car. Wells sighed. "We searched everything thoroughly. No blood, no fingerprints except for old ones that had been worn away. The car frame was rusted, the interior almost rotten. No DNA, nothing that could help reopen the criminal case." Karen asked, "What about the person who dropped off the car?" "No security cameras at the yard. No receipts, no ID. The person paid cash, left within 10 minutes. Karen was silent, but her eyes didn't hide her suspicion. She left the police station in silence, carrying the pink purse, this time as if she were carrying a cry for help. They left the police station and returned to the police station, the tensions of the long journey and recent thoughts exhausting them. But suddenly, about 3 miles from the hotel, the car jerked violently and shut down completely. The dashboard lights flashed, the engine clanked and then died. Karen tried to turn the ignition back on 3 times. Useless. The car stood alone in the deserted road. On both sides were sparse forests, without a telephone signal. "Stay in the car, Mom," Karen said, getting out, opening the hood. But before she could check, the sound of another car rang out from afar, the headlights sweeping across like a blade cutting through the rain. The truck stopped close to the curb. The person who stepped out was none other than Eli Turner. "Oh, Mrs. Rayner." Eli looked just surprised enough. "I didn't expect to meet you again. Car's broken down?" "What a coincidence," Nora muttered. Eli was calm, not in a hurry. "I just went shopping for the garage. Can help. I have a tow rope if you want me to take you back to the repair shop. There's better machinery." Karen glanced at her mother. Both understood they had no other choice. The rain began to fall heavily. The road was deserted. No cars had passed in the last 10 minutes. Karen squeezed the door handle tightly, her eyes fixed on the pink purse placed in the back seat. They got into Eli's car, feeling the air in the car tight and humid, the smell of old car plastic mixed with a slight smell of cigarettes. Eli was still friendly, talking about the weather, about mountain roads, about some deer occasionally jumping across the road in the summer. But Karen heard nothing more. Her mind focused on the piece of paper in the bag. The words, "Daddy not coming back, me locked up," kept swirling in her head like a screw tightening into the wooden floor. Eli stopped the car at the back entrance of the salvage yard. Unlike the way they used to go yesterday. No signs, no lights, no sound but the rain. "The main gate is locked because I was late," Eli explained. "We'll go in through the back door, I have the key." The rain had just stopped when Eli's car turned into the back of the salvage yard. The headlights shone on the nearly 2-meter-high iron fence, densely woven, and Karen noticed the layer of barbed wire on top had rusted brown. There were no signs, no bells, just an old metal gate that was manually opened with a key. The sound of the hinges creaked like the groaning of metal that had never been oiled for many years. Eli said, "This back is usually rarely entered. It's late, so I locked the gate to be sure." His voice was still calm, but Karen felt the stiffness in that smoothness. It's like someone has memorized a role, but has never performed it in front of real people. The inside of the salvage yard was empty. There was no sign of any workers. The old cars lay silently in the light from the faded yellow sodium lights hanging on the wooden pillars. Karen noticed the main office they entered yesterday, where the pink purse hung, was now unlit. "Just come in here and sit for a while. I'll have someone check your car," Eli said, and opened an old storage next to the workshop. The metal door made a deep sound, then quietly closed behind them. Inside was a wide space, with the smell of machine oil and damp wood vaguely wafting. There was a round table, a few iron chairs, and a strange man standing with his back turned, looking down at the toolbox. Eli said softly, "Introduced to you two. This is Cole Maddox, my friend, just arrived from Wyoming, who used to collect old cars in the north." The man turned around. Cole Maddox, about 50 years old, tall and thin, with a ragged beard and strange eyes. Karen immediately noticed the look in his eyes. Not the kind of greeting, but the kind of quick scan, probing, and then lingering longer than necessary. He held out his hand to shake it, but Karen just nodded. Nora took half a step back, her hand lightly touching her daughter's arm. Her old mother's intuition was correct. Something was wrong here. Cole sat down, folding his arms. The light from the round bulb above cast a shadow, making his face look like it was cut in half. One half bright, one half in shadow. His voice was deep, hoarse, and strangely accented. I heard you've been looking for your missing daughter for 20 years. I used to meet a girl with eyes very similar to yours at a small rest stop in Wyoming. But the girl didn't know her name and was always dragged away quickly by the adults she was with. Karen kept her voice calm. When did you say that happened? It was about 10 years ago. He smiled slightly, his eyes not leaving Karen's face. I keep wondering, if a mother finds out her daughter used to live somewhere, called by a different name, living a different life, would she have the courage to believe that? That question, not wrong, but the way it was spoken made Karen's spine cold. She reached down to her jacket pocket, gently pressing the phone's recording button. The short beep passed in silence. Fortunately, no one noticed. Nora spoke slowly, her eyes unblinking. If you know anything, you should say it. Don't test the patience of a mother. Cole changed his posture. His faint smile turned into a frown. Mrs. Rayner, have you ever thought, if the truth is more painful than lies? Karen clenched the pink purse in her heart. She didn't say anything, but her eyes at this moment were no longer waiting, but confronting. The air in the room suddenly thickened. Then Cole stood up, slowly pulling something out from under his jacket, a black pistol. Now stay silent. No shouting, no asking, no acting, he said calmly, as if reading the operating instructions of the machine. Karen hugged the pink purse tightly. Nora put her hand over her chest, but didn't scream. Both had lived too long in the darkness of waiting, and the darkness now had a clear shape. Eli came out from behind, his eyes no longer avoiding. He said softly, "We only need a few hours. Then everything will be fine." Karen looked straight at Eli, her voice steady. "You knew from the beginning, didn't you? You knew the bag, knew the car, knew who brought it here." Eli didn't answer. He looked down. In that moment, the initial stiffness now turned into a silent acceptance. Cole ordered, "Tie them up. Let's go." Two men took the fabric tape and blindfolded the two mothers and daughters. Karen tried to feel every sound. The sound of metal doors opening, the sound of wheels running on gravel, the sound of iron frames closing. When she was pushed into the van, Karen still held the pink purse close to her. Her hands trembled slightly, but in her heart rose something unnameable. Not fear, but the feeling of getting very close to the truth. The truck jolted along the bumpy, winding roads between pine forests and rocky hillsides. Karen didn't know how long it had been. She was blindfolded, her hands tied lightly with fabric, maybe because Cole didn't want to leave marks. No one spoke during the trip. Only the sound of the engine chugging, occasionally drowned out by the sound of branches scraping against the side of the car, as if scratching at the old time. Nora sat next to her, not saying a word since she was tied up. Karen could feel her mother's breath, weak but steady. In her hands, she still held the pink purse, the only thing left connecting with Emily. Then the car stopped. The back door opened, dim light shone in. A strange voice shouted coldly, "Get out of the car!" Karen got out, her feet touching rough stone. They were led on a small concrete path, then down 4 steps. The sound of unlocking, metal hinges rang out. The sound echoed to the floor, making her spine cold. They were taken into a white stone room, without windows, with fluorescent lights shining from above. The room wasn't moldy, but cold, soundproof. The feeling was clear as an old shelter was renovated. The door locked tightly behind her. Karen and Nora were untied. The loose straps were also removed. No one spoke. Karen looked around. The walls were smooth. In one corner, a small security camera was installed on the wall. There were wooden chairs, a thin blanket, a plastic water bottle, and a single electrical outlet. No knives, no sharp objects, no watch. A well-calculated cell. No torture, but no way out. About 2 hours later, the sound of the iron door opening slightly, without the sound of the lock turning. A girl was brought in, unrestricted, unblindfolded. The girl was about 19 or 20 years old, with dark brown hair long over her shoulders. wearing simple clothes. Her eyes were silent, opaque, like the bottomless water of a well. They called her Sarah. Karen stood up immediately. She didn't say anything, just observed. Every step, posture, even the gesture when the girl shrugged before the lights. Nora had also sat up, her eyes following like a mirror reflecting her daughter's emotions. Then Karen saw something she could not forget. A thin scar lying just above her right eyebrow. She was the one who took Emily to sew up that wound when she was 6 years old, after falling off her bicycle in the park near her house. That scar cannot be faked. It can't be on anyone else. Not if it wasn't Emily. Karen approached, speaking very slowly. "What's your name?" The girl looked at her, not answering, not dodging, but her eyes couldn't connect with the outside world, as if she had lived too long in silence, to the point where language became something foreign. "How long have you lived here?" Karen tried to ask, more gently, not forcing. "I was here." The answer was simple, disjointed, but true. Nora gently interjected, "Do you like reading books? Has anyone ever told you any stories?" Sarah shook her head. Her lips pursed, then retreated to the corner of the room. Karen didn't force it anymore. She returned to her seat, opened her backpack, took out the pink purse, and placed it on her palm. Without saying a word, she walked over and placed the purse next to Sarah, as if returning a part of her memory. The girl looked at the purse for a long time. Those eyes, both tired and foolish, finally stirred. Sarah looked down, lightly touching the zipper. Her hand trembled, then opened the purse. Each finger traced the fabric, then stopped at the crooked stitched corner, where her mother had mended it with pink thread. She burst into tears. Not loudly, only tears flowing like a river bursting its banks. Karen knelt down, putting her hand on her shoulder. "You're Emily." "I'm Karen. I've been looking for you for 20 years. Sarah looked up, her eyes full of tears. But she didn't nod, didn't shake. She couldn't say her name. Her mouth moved, but what came out was only, "I don't know." Nora covered her mouth. Karen bowed her head. No one in that room could keep their normal breathing. Like someone standing before excavated relics. Can't confirm that is what they believe, but all the traces point in one direction. After that, Cole appeared, calmly opening the door. He held out his hand, without weapons, saying, "It's almost time for you to leave. Someone will come to verify. You found what you wanted, or what you thought you wanted." He looked at Karen for a long time. Karen didn't answer, but she had decided. When Karen stepped out of that white stone room, her hand took Sarah's. Not tight, just enough for the other person to know that someone was there, waiting and trusting. That day began with a faint ray of sunshine, shining through the small window of the white stone room. There were no windows, but a small vent was close to the ceiling, enough for the light to shine in a narrow streak. Karen sat on the wooden chair, the light covering her shoulders, like drawing a quiet halo. Sarah, the girl still called by that name, sat in the corner of the room, curled up in a blanket, two hands hugging the pink purse as if hugging a soft memory. Since last night, she had not said another word, except for a sentence that kept repeating in her intermittent sleep. "He said my dad left. He didn't come back." Karen had heard that sentence 3 times. Each time she saw the corner of Sarah's eyes twitch slightly, like an old reflex was reviving. That was not a sentence she had memorized, not a lie. It was a remaining fragment of memory, the truest fragment. At around noon, a helicopter whizzed across the roof of the wooden house above. Nora stood up, opening the curtain to cover the vent. "Someone's coming," she said, her voice deep. "Hopefully the right person." It was the federal police. The special team arrived following the emergency signal that Karen had set in her phone. A triple tap on the power button when she was detained, activating the location sent to the Homeland Security headquarters. Thanks to this, after less than 36 hours, they had found the location of the farm. which used to be a storage base during World War II, now being used illegally by Cole. Cole had fled less than an hour before the police arrived. The room he was staying in was cleaned neatly, no traces, no documents, but Eli was not as lucky. He was arrested while cleaning up his belongings at the back of the yard, with a tired, non-resisting attitude. Eli claimed that he didn't know who Sarah was, just thought she was Cole's niece. But with the recordings and security cameras that the technical team discovered in the hard drive, Eli's role as an accomplice was no longer ambiguous. Karen, Nora, and Sarah were taken back to the Federal Security Center in Jackson. There, they were checked up on, filled out files, and most importantly, underwent DNA testing. An old doctor wearing round glasses was the one who directly took samples from Sarah and Karen. He said gently, his voice professional but not cold, "We will use 3 comparison tools: bloodline, gene system, mother-child index, and micro-DNA analysis in hair, oral cells. The results will be available in 12 hours. Karen nodded. She didn't ask anything else, just sat next to Sarah, holding her hand, and whispered, "Whatever the result, you're not alone." The waiting time was as long as a lifetime. Nora walked around the hallway to keep her heart beating. Sarah was left to rest in a private room with staff caring for and monitoring her. Karen sat in front of the window on the 3rd floor, looking at the distant mountains, where fog lightly covered like a screen covering the truth. The police sealed the pink purse as evidence and took the old Ford Explorer to the storage room. A temporary report from the forensic team stated, "No bloodstains, no DNA, no hair fibers of sufficient quality on the car." Even more unusual, there were traces of mechanical erasing on the steering wheel and floor mat. Clearly, someone had done it very carefully. Late that evening, an investigating officer entered the waiting room, holding files in his hand. His face was serious, not trying to hide anything. But Karen had seen it from his eyes. Something was wrong. "Mrs. Rayner, we are very sorry. The DNA sample came back negative. There is no mother-child relationship." Each word, like falling on the cold cement floor. Karen didn't react immediately. Nora hugged her daughter, as if afraid she would fall. After a moment, Karen spoke, her voice not high, but deep. "The test is wrong. Something's not right. Who are you comparing the DNA to?" The officer hesitated. "With your sample, and from the hospital database where your daughter was born." Karen clenched her hands tightly. So if someone had changed the medical records, or if Sarah had been drugged, changing her genetic structure, or if the DNA was scrambled, what then? The silence in that room was not because of a lack of words, but because no one could deny that possibility. The police concluded that Sarah was the victim of an illegal detention, with signs of human trafficking. However, they temporarily assumed that she was not related to the disappearance of Emily Rayner. A coincidence? Someone who looked like the other to every small scar, childish handwriting, and emotional reaction? With the police, maybe. With Karen, no. She made it clear to the investigator. "I know my child's eyes. I gave birth to her, raised her, sang her to sleep, bandaged the wound on her forehead for her. DNA doesn't recognize it, but a mother's heart recognizes it." The police could only pat Karen on the shoulder. They looked at the eyes that were full of exhaustion from constantly chasing hope and then being extinguished of the mother. But the truth before her eyes was so clear, Karen collapsed there, tears just falling down because the truth was too painful, tearing her apart from the inside. The next day, she had to embrace that ultimate disappointment and return to her home. Boise in June this year is not sultry. But in the small wooden house at the end of Raymond Road, the air was still thick as an unfinished winter. Karen Rayner sat in her familiar chair by the window. It wasn't quite bright yet. Everything around her was still the same. The old photo frame, the plastic box containing the purple dress, the voicemail box with the news repeated again and again. Only she was different, not in the more silver hair or the new wrinkles around her eyes. but in her hands that no longer shake when making coffee, in her steps that no longer hesitate when entering Emily's room, in her eyes, no longer praying, but setting out on a journey. Since returning from the shock of the negative DNA, Karen has barely slept. Not because of the pain, but because in her head she constantly replayed the details that had flashed by too quickly. The scar on Sarah's eyebrow, the coded sentence repeated, "Daddy not coming back," and the look of panic when the girl saw the pink purse. No child would fake those things. Impossible. That morning, when Karen opened the door to walk out to get the mail, she saw it immediately. An old envelope, yellow paper, without a stamp, without a sender's name, tucked between the bank envelopes, folded in half. The edge of the paper slightly crumpled. Inside was a photo, not too clear, but enough to make Karen's world seem to stop breathing. In the photo was a girl about 10 years old, wearing a light sweater, her hair tied to the side, sitting alone in front of a dilapidated wooden house. Behind her was white ground like limestone. Although the photo was taken from afar and blurred, Karen immediately recognized those eyes, the eyes that she had seen in the mirror for nearly the first 10 years of Emily's life. On the back of the photo, there was only a scrawled handwritten line, "Find where people don't want to be found. Wyoming. Wind tunnel. Number 17. White stone." Nora sat at the dining table, holding her reading glasses, reading the line again and again. She didn't say anything for a few minutes. Then, in a trembling but decisive voice, she said, "Karen, this could be a game. Could be the last illusion you cling to so you don't collapse." Karen sat down opposite. Her voice was calm but clear, as if distilled from 20 years of silence. "I used to hope. I used to believe. I used to beg for the truth. But this time, it's not like that. This is not hope. This is directions. And if it's a trap, then it's a trap that leads to my daughter." Nora looked at her daughter. Those eyes, now no longer tearful, but as silent as stone, as hard as old tree bark, having gone through too many snow seasons, but never breaking. The next day, Karen began to prepare. Not ostentatiously, not reporting to the police, not taking too many belongings, just a small backpack, a few sets of clothes, a recorder, a flashlight, a compass, a few bags of dried food, and a map printed from Google satellite photos. The photo of Emily, the original, was laminated and kept in her wallet. Before leaving the house, she wrote a note left for Nora. "If I don't come back in 3 days, give this photo to the police. Wind tunnel number 17, Wyoming. But if I come back with Emily, then you'll be the first to know." The second journey back to Wyoming this time did not bring blind hope. Karen did not expect to see a girl sitting waiting for her mother in the light. She knew what she was about to face could be a buried truth, a place where people were once imprisoned, deceived, and erased. The map showed an old cluster of buildings from the World War II era located north of Cody, near the Whitestone Mountains, which used to be an area for testing windstorms and temporary shelters. Wind tunnel number 17 inches does not exist on official maps, but there was an area coded LQ17 on public land records, revoked from 1996, nearly 15 kilometers from the main road. To enter, you have to walk. There is no paved road. No one lives nearby. That afternoon, when the sun set behind the pine trees, Karen stood on the top of the white stone slope. She looked down at the barren land below, low hills worn smooth by the wind, patchy concrete blocks protruding from the ground, like vague traces of a forgotten time. Karen opened the map, compared it, then went straight along the old trail. An hour later, she saw an iron door half buried underground, with the number 17 sprayed in red paint, which had faded. She didn't call, didn't knock, just stood there, listening, her hand on the doorknob. The door was cold as stone, but after it could be all she had been looking for. It could also be the truth too great for a mother to bear. Karen took a breath. She knew after that door, there would be no turning back. The heavy iron door opened with a dry creak, as long as the moans of forgotten metal. Karen used all her weight to push the door inside. A rush of moldy and cold air hit her face. The smell of rusty metal, dampness, and something else, like the smell of time trapped. Inside was a narrow corridor. The walls on both sides were rough stone, the stains mottled like dried blood. Underfoot, each step echoed the sound of itself, not too loud, but enough to make the walker feel like they were being eavesdropped on by the darkness itself. Karen turned on the flashlight. The faint light drew a golden streak on the background. She walked slowly, holding the light tightly, the other hand holding her jacket pocket, where she still kept the photo and recorder. At the corner of the cellar was an old computer set, thick-screened, next to a mini-generator running low. On the ceiling was a security camera covered with dust, but the indicator light was still flashing. Karen walked closer, sitting down before the desk. Her hand gently touched the computer mouse. The screen lit up slowly, as if from a long sleep. It displayed a series of video files, recorded in 2005-2006, stretching all the way to 2023. No titles, just numbered indexes. She clicked on the first file. The screen showed a little girl, brown hair tied to the side, sitting before a wooden table, holding a pencil. A child's voice rang out, trembling. "My name is Samantha." Karen was shaken to her core. That little girl was Emily. Was Emily when she was little, around 8 or 9 years old, but no longer being called by her real name. The light in her eyes in the video was gone, replaced by robotic repetition, as if being forced to forget herself. "Write it again," a deep male voice said off-screen. "Yes, Samantha." The girl bowed her head, trembling, continuing. Karen sat silently. It felt as if she herself had been locked away in that cellar of memories, where all truth could no longer be denied. But before she could press the next file, she heard footsteps behind her, light but steady. "So, you finally arrived." That voice, hoarse, dry, and sliding into the space like an old blade. Karen turned around. Cole Maddox was standing there. He was older than she remembered, but his eyes, the eyes of a predator, remained the same, deep, dark, and dangerous. He didn't carry a weapon in his hand, but his presence froze the air. "You found it," he said, pointing at the screen, smirking. "I was going to erase everything, but then I thought, sometimes the truth should be witnessed by the person who deserves to suffer." Karen stood up, blocking the screen. "What did you do to her?" Cole sighed, then began walking slowly around the cellar, as if giving a lecture. "In 2004, I was a drifter, unemployed, just released from prison for assaulting a family member. I had nothing, except hatred. I saw a happy family stop at a rest stop, a gentle man, a little girl who smiled throughout the meal. I just wanted to squeeze in. I just wanted a seat in that picture." "And what did you do?" He stopped, not avoiding the question. "I pretended to need a ride. Thomas, the fool, agreed. That night at a cheap motel near the state line, I strangled him when he went out for a smoke, hid his body in the woods, told the little girl, 'Your dad left. He's not coming back.' She believed it." Karen didn't scream, didn't cry, but her body seemed to freeze from the inside out. "Why?" she asked, emphasizing each word. Cole looked at her, and for the first time, his voice softened, as if he too were peeling back a wound. "Because I used to be the kid who got left behind. My mother left. My father beat me. I believed if I could keep a child with me, if I could start over, my way, someone would love me. I called her Samantha. I taught her to read, write, fear, obey. I built a world where I was the only one she remembered." Karen didn't move. Everything inside her, every blood vessel, every heartbeat, seemed to be screaming, but her eyes didn't leave Cole. "And to this day, you still think that's love?" Cole gave a faint smile, Not answering. He walked closer. And now you know. No need for a fuss anymore. No need for a trial. I just need one last thing. To end this. Cole pulled a folding knife from his belt. Karen backed away, but didn't run. She looked straight at him. Not with fear, but with expectation. You're the last witness, and you're her mother. I can't let you live. The moment Cole raised his hand, a dry crack rang out from the right. The cellar door burst open. A figure appeared, wielding a metal pipe, hitting Cole directly in the back of the head. Cole collapsed to the stone floor, not even seeing who had betrayed him. A young man, Karen looked in horror at the fiery eyes of the boy. The crack sounded like tearing through the darkness. Cole Maddox didn't have time to react. The blow was decisive. Precise. The iron pipe landed squarely on the back of his neck. He collapsed onto the stone floor without a sound. The knife slipped from his hand, rolling into the darkness. Karen hadn't had time to scream, but her hand had already clenched her jacket pocket, where she still kept the recorder. She looked up and froze. The person who had just saved her was a young man, thin, his brown hair tousled with sweat and dust. The flashlight shone across his angular cheekbones, but it was his eyes, red-rimmed, full of rage, that caused Karen to exclaim softly, as if recognizing a ghost. "Reed?" He nodded, not saying anything. In his hand, he still held the iron pipe, shaking, but not letting go. His breath was ragged, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision just made. Reed Carraway, a name that had only briefly appeared in some of Karen's investigative files, but always left a blurry, hard-to-grasp impression. A boy who had grown up alongside Cole Maddox, not the mastermind, but the one who used to know. Karen backed away, but didn't run. She looked straight at him, whispering, "You sent the letter." Reed nodded. His eyes didn't leave Cole. He spoke quickly, decisively, as if afraid that if he stopped, he wouldn't have enough courage. "I've been living in guilt for 20 years. He killed Thomas that night and forced me to help. I cleaned the room, burned the papers. I used to be assigned to watch Emily when she was just 10 years old. I took that picture because in that moment I saw the light was still in her eyes. I couldn't forget it. I couldn't keep silent anymore." Karen didn't need to ask anymore. She understood. No one could save Emily without someone on the inside daring to betray evil. Reed turned, signaling, "Come with me. She's still here, but she's been drugged. 2 locks. I have the key card." They ran. Through the cold stone corridor, through the dusty machine room. Reed led the way, his steps quick, precise, knowing every corner, every door, every code. They stopped before a large steel door with a control panel attached, lights blinking dimly. Reed entered the code, then took out a plastic card from his jacket. "Cole's key card," he explained, without turning around. "He trusted me, used to let me handle medical stuff when he was away." The door opened. Inside was a small room, lined with soundproof foam, no windows. A single bed was placed in the middle of the room. On it, Emily lay on her side, her eyes closed, her arms limp. Karen rushed over, her heart about to burst. She was afraid she was too late, afraid this was just a dream extending from an old nightmare. "Emily, Emily." Reed touched Emily's wrist. "There's still a pulse, just sedatives." He turned urgently. "I've sent a locator signal. The police will be here in 10 minutes, but we have to be ready." The sound of a helicopter began to echo from afar. Karen sat down, placing Emily's head on her lap, gently stroking her hair. Beneath her hand was real hair, not a photo, not a memory. It was flesh and blood, breathing, the daughter she had searched for half her life. Emily moaned softly. Her eyelids twitched. "Mom," Karen choked up. "Yes, Mom's here. I'm here now." Outside the corridor, the police stormed in, guns drawn, securing the entire area. Cole Maddox was taken away in handcuffs in a lightly unconscious state. Eli, after being arrested at the shop earlier, had confessed everything about destroying the car, erasing traces, and helping Cole maintain the detention center for many years. With their testimony, Thomas Rayner's body was found in a sparsely wooded area about 40 miles from the 2004 motel, the body still wearing the dark shirt that Karen had washed that morning. Identified from dental records and DNA, no doubt. Karen didn't cry, didn't faint, didn't call out his name like one often sees in movies. She just walked over and looked at the newly excavated ground, then sat down on the ground. Her hands, once trembling, now rested lightly on the withered grass as if touching his shoulder. "I'm sorry it took 20 years to get here. But you know what? She's still alive." A drop of water fell. Not tears, but autumn rain, light, healing. It was as if Thomas was listening. A week later, Karen decided not to bury him in a crowded cemetery. She chose a small piece of land at the end of the road near the hill behind the house, where Emily used to ride her bike, where Thomas had taken the last photo of the entire family of 3. The tombstone wasn't large, but Karen personally chose the type of gray granite with white veins, like the shoes Thomas used to wear every morning to work. Engraved on the stele simply, Thomas J. Rayner, 1968 to 2004, the father, the husband, the one who never left. On the day of the tomb dedication, Emily stood behind. She didn't remember the day her father died clearly. Couldn't remember his face. But when Karen put her hand on the stele and said, "You used to ask what a dad is. A dad is someone who's still waiting for you at home, even if you've been gone for a long time." Emily nodded slightly. She placed next to the grave a crude pencil drawing, a picture of a man holding a baby girl, with the sunlight in the back. That afternoon, the sun shone golden. Wind rustled lightly through the trees, and Karen knew. No one truly leaves when people still remember, still call each other by name with love. The third floor of the medical center was as quiet as if time was slowing down. Room 317 had frosted glass doors, curtains drawn so that the late afternoon light fell obliquely on the hospital bed. Emily lay there, the girl who had been named Samantha for 20 years. She had awakened after 3 days of intensive treatment. Sedatives were gradually reduced. Neurologists confirmed that there was no long-term physical damage, but her mind was buried in a deep layer of sand, both quiet and fragile. She didn't recognize Karen, didn't call her by any title. Her first words were single words, interrupted. Whatever she was asked, she responded simply, "Don't know." Her eyes were bewildered, not afraid, but empty, as if every memory had been shaved off. Karen didn't cry, didn't urge her. She sat there, every day at exactly noon, placed a warm cup of tea on the table, folded the small towel next to the pillow, told stories without beginning or end, trivial things, stories that didn't need anyone to respond. "You used to not like wearing dresses with frills, remember? But Grandma still gave you one every Christmas. The first time you rode a bike, you fell. Your dad cried louder than you did. Once, you said you hated Mom's baked beans. You hid under the dining table for hours." Emily didn't react, just looked out the window or nodded off to sleep. But Karen still returned regularly, day in and day out. No expectations, no requirements. One afternoon, it rained lightly. Karen entered the room with a small box, old, paint peeling, but wiped clean carefully. She didn't say anything right away. Waited until Emily woke up from her nap, then sat down and opened the box. Inside was the pink Snoopy purse, faded with time. Only a few old ink marks were barely visible. Karen placed it gently next to Emily's pillow. Emily glanced at it. No reaction. But her right hand moved slightly, almost unconsciously. Karen said gently, her voice not high, as if reading an old diary page, "I wrote your name inside the purse. On the inside lining. You used to be mad at me for doing that. You said, Do you think I'm always losing things?" I laughed and said, "No. I just want if someone finds it, they'll know who you are." Then you were silent. But that night I saw you take a needle and thread to sew the bag carefully. That stitch, it's still here." Emily turned her head, slowly. Her eyes were still cloudy, but for the first time there was something shining in them. Not memories, but the collision of two worlds inside a body. She touched the purse. Her fingers slipped into the lining, touching the rough thread, the smeared ink. Karen was silent. She didn't need to lead the way anymore. Emily's hand clenched the purse. Her eyes closed. Her shoulders shook slightly. And then, as if there was a rain falling backwards from deep inside her chest, she burst into tears. The first sobs were very small, like the sound of a string being pulled out of tune, but the next moment, it was a burst. The girl's voice broke in tears. "I know this. I used to carry it. I carried it when I was Emily." Karen didn't hug Emily tightly. She just put her hand on her shoulder, gently, just enough for the other person to know she wasn't alone. In that moment, no name, no file, no test results were needed. All the truths, what had been stolen, changed, covered up, had dissolved under one thing only: recognition, by feeling, by stitch, by the hand that still remembered how to hug an old purse. Outside the window, it was still raining lightly. Nora stood outside the hallway, quietly watching through the glass. In her hand was a woolen scarf she was knitting. She knew, without looking any further, that Karen had just stepped out of 20 years of darkness. Emily, or Samantha, or any name that had been forced upon her, no longer mattered, because right in that room, she had been called by her true name, and touched by something that couldn't be faked: motherhood. A few days later, at the federal police office, Reed voluntarily reported the whole truth. Eli, under pressure and irrefutable evidence, was also forced to admit his role in helping destroy evidence, covering up the case, and helping Cole maintain the detention center for Sarah, Emily, for many years. With their testimony, Thomas Rayner's body was found in a sparsely wooded area about 40 miles from the 2004 motel, the body still wearing the dark shirt that Karen had washed that morning. Identified from dental records and DNA, no doubt. Karen didn't cry, didn't faint, didn't shout his name like people often see in movies. She just walked over and looked at the newly excavated ground, then sat down on the ground. Her hands, once trembling, now rested lightly on the withered grass, as if touching his shoulder. "I'm sorry. It took 20 years to get here. But you know what? She's still alive." A drop of water fell. Not tears, but early autumn rain, light, healing. It was as if Thomas was listening. A week later, Karen decided not to bury him in a crowded cemetery. She chose a small piece of land at the end of the road near the hill behind the house, where Emily used to ride her bike, where Thomas had taken the last photo of the entire family of 3. The tombstone wasn't large, but Karen personally chose the type of gray granite with white veins, like the shoes Thomas used to like to wear every morning to work. Engraved on the stele simply, Thomas J. Rayner, 1968 to 2004. The father, the husband, the one who never left. On the day of the tomb dedication, Emily stood behind. She didn't remember the day her father died clearly, couldn't remember his face. But when Karen put her hand on the stele and said, "You used to ask what a dad is. A dad is someone who's still waiting for you at home, even if you've been gone for a long time." Emily nodded slightly. She placed next to the grave a crude pencil drawing, a picture of a man holding a baby girl with the sunlight in the back. That afternoon, the sun shone golden. Wind rustled lightly through the trees. And Karen knew no one truly leaves when people still remember, still call each other by name with love.